today's video, I want to show you how to knit one of my ultimate fast and easy knits. I don't know what it is about diagonally knitted projects, but they just seem to fly off my needles at a speed that no other blanket seems to manage. Even though they are the same size and probably have the same amount of stitches, they just seem to grow so much faster. The version of this diagonal blanket that I want to show you how to knit today uses a specific type of increase that gives you these really cute little peekaboo holes and adds definition between your side borders and the main body of your blanket. Those of you who aren't new to the channel will know that I have a very similar blanket already up as a tutorial, but the type of increase we use in that one leaves you with a very solid piece of knitting with no definition really between your side border and the main body of your blanket. And I've known for quite a while that quite a lot of you would like a project like this one that has these little peepholes. If you want to knit a blanket like mine, I have knit a blanket that is 60 centimetres wide by 80 centimetres long, or thereabouts. You're going to need 300 grams of double knit yarn. If you're not based in the UK, that is 3-weight yarn or light worsted weight yarn. You are also going to need some circular needles. For double knit yarn, I use 4mm needles, and the length that you are going to want is probably up to 150 centimetres because the diagonal edge of the blanket does get quite long before you start decreasing. So you want to make sure that you've got needles that are long enough to accommodate your stitches. And that's it. We don't need any other stitch markers. We don't need anything else. We just need our needles and our yarn. So without further ado, let's get knitting. The first part of the blanket that we want to work is that initial increase. So we are going out from a point and working outwards, adding stitches every row. The main pattern repeat is a 1-row repeat, but to get that nice neat corner, we're going to work 4 setup rows before we head into that main pattern repeat. So to start your blanket, you want to start by casting on 4 stitches using the long tail cast on method. If you need some help with that, I have a separate video and I will link that up above. For the first setup row, you want to knit every single stitch. So you're just going to work across and knit 4 stitches. Setup row 2, you start by knitting the first stitch. And then in the second stitch we want to increase, and because we want to maintain a nice solid corner, we don't want to introduce those peekaboo holes yet. The type of increase that we're going to work is a knit front back. The way you work this is you're going to pick up the stitch as if to knit and pull up a loop as if to knit, but don't drop the loop off your left hand needle yet. Swing your right hand needle round, pop it back into the stitch from front to back, and pick up a second loop. And at that point you can take out your left hand needle and you will have increased 1 stitch and turned it into 2. And then the last 2 stitches of the row you are going to knit. Set up row 3, you want to knit the first 2 stitches. And then into the third stitch you are going to work that knit front back increase. And then the last 2 stitches you are going to knit. Setup row 4 is the final setup row we're going to work, and you are going to again start by knitting the first 2 stitches. Then work your knit front back increase into the third stitch, and then knit the final 3 stitches. By the end of setup row 4, you should have 7 stitches on your needles. The rest of your increase section from now until the point that you are ready to stop adding width is a 1-row repeat, so it's really nice and easy. You start by knitting the first 3 stitches. And then we're going to work a yarn over increase, and the way you do that, if like me you are a continental knitter, you're just going to pop your working yarn on that right hand needle, and then you want to knit to the end of the row. And you can see here, this is our yarn over. By lifting the yarn onto the needle before we carried on knitting, we have gone from 7 stitches and increased to 8. So every row that you work, you will increase by 1 stitch. Let's go over that a couple more times for you. So your repeat row, you start by knitting the first 3 stitches. Then you're going to work your yarn over increase and knit every stitch until the end of the row. Once more, and then I'll leave you to go away and finish your increases. You're going to knit the first 3 stitches, work a yarn over increase, and then knit to the end of the row. So to build width, all you want to do is carry on working this row until your project is as wide as you want it to be. When it comes to measuring your project, don't measure the edge that is attached to your needles, measure one of the 2 edges that comes out from your needles, because after you've worked a few more rows, you will see that this very definitively becomes the point of your triangle. I'll go away and make this sample a little bit bigger so that you can see what I mean, but you just need to keep repeating this row until one of these edges is as wide as you want your project to be. Here we go. So I have worked several more rows to increase this blanket size up. Obviously mine is just a small sample, but you get the idea. And the edge that you want to measure is either this edge or this edge, not this edge. You can see that this edge here will make up the outer edge of your blanket. So when you have reached a point that your edge is as wide as you want the short edge of your rectangle to be, if you are making a rectangular blanket like I did, then you need to head on to the section that works on maintaining the width here. So no longer making this part wider, but still making this edge longer so that we manage to build length to create a rectangle. You can make a square blanket if you want, and if you want to make a square blanket, you can skip this section entirely and you can just head straight to the section that covers just the decrease section, which is the triangular section that makes our blanket complete. But for those of you that want a rectangular blanket, I'm going to talk you through that now. The middle section of the blanket, as I call it, is a 2-row repeat. So this first section was a 1-row repeat, but because we want to increase at one end and decrease at the other to maintain the width here so that we don't add any more stitches here, it becomes a 2-row repeat. If you're new to knitting and you struggle to see where you've increased and you've decreased for this section, you might want to pop a stitch marker at the end that you are decreasing, just so that you don't accidentally get confused. Row 1 of the 2-row repeat covers the decrease that stops adding width onto your blanket. So you want to start by knitting the first 2 stitches. Then you want to work a decrease, and the type of decrease that we're going to work is a knit 2 together. So you're going to get the next 2 stitches and knit them both at the same time, and that way you are turning 2 stitches into 1. Then, because we still want to add these little peekaboo holes, you are going to yarn over, and then the next 2 stitches you are also going to knit together. So it's another knit 2 together. So what we have done here is we've knitted the first 2 and then decreased a stitch, and then we've increased a stitch again by working our yarn over. So to make sure that across the row we have decreased 1 stitch, we worked another decrease after the yarn over. So it's knit 2 together, yarn over, and then knit 2 together. And then you are going to knit until the end of the row. The second of our 2-row repeats works on still adding length to the other edge that you're working on. So this row is the same as the row that we worked during our increase section. You're going to start by knitting the first 3 stitches, work a yarn over to create an increase, and then knit to the end of the row. Let's cover those 2 rows once more. You can see that actually it takes a few rows for this decrease edge to actually start looking like a corner, which is why I suggested for the new knitters amongst you, you might want to pop a stitch marker just to mark this as the end that you're working your decreases. So the first of your 2 rows is your decrease row, and you start by knitting the first 2 stitches. Then you're going to knit 2 together to decrease down by 1 stitch. yarn over so that we carry on creating those little peepholes, and then again knit 2 together once more. So that's knit 2 together, yarn over and knit 2 together, and then you're going to knit until the end of the row. The second row of that 2-row repeat still adds the length to make your long edge of your rectangle longer, and is worked as follows. Knit the first 3 stitches, work a yarn over increase, and then knit to the end of the row. So that one is nice and easy. After a few more rows, this decreased corner will start to pull itself round and will look very much more like a corner, and you want to repeat those 2 rows until the long edge of your rectangle is the size that you want it to be. So like me, I made my short edge 65 centimeters ish, and then I knitted until the length of my blanket was 80 centimeters. So I worked those 2 rows until this long edge was 80 centimeters long, and then I moved on to the decrease section to finish everything off. The final part of the blanket that we work is the decrease section. So once you worked your increase section, your middle section, if you are doing a rectangular blanket, the last section that you need to tackle is the decrease section, and that's where we start working down to reduce our stitches and then to square or rectangle off our blanket. If you're making a rectangular blanket, you will want to make sure that this longer edge is the length that you want it to be. In my blanket's case, that was 80 centimeters. If you're making a square blanket, then you're probably coming to this straight from the increase and you won't have worked that middle section at all. It doesn't matter, the rows that you work are exactly the same. If you've been making a rectangular blanket, then this 1-row repeat for the decrease section will be familiar to you. If you're making a square blanket and you've come straight from the increase section, then don't worry, I'm going to talk you through it again here. So to start your decrease section, it's a 1-row repeat from now on. So you are working the same 1 row for each and every row that you work from now on, and you are going to start by knitting the first 2 stitches. Then you're going to knit the next 2 stitches together, and that is as simple as it seems. You just grab 2 stitches instead of 1 and then knit the 2 of them together. Next, we still want to carry on creating these little peekaboo holes, so you are going to yarn over and work an increase, and then straight after that increase you are again going to knit the next 2 stitches together. So you have knit 2 stitches, knit 2 stitches together, you've yarned over to increase, and then you've knit the next 2 stitches together. And then for the rest of the row, you are just going to knit every single stitch. Let's go over that row once more. So you are going to knit the first 2 stitches and then knit the next 2 stitches together. So that's a knit 2 together. Then you are going to work a yarn over increase that creates those little peekaboo holes, and then you are also going to work a knit 2 together over the next 2 stitches. So we're turning 2 stitches into 1, and then the rest of the row you are just going to knit all the way along, knitting every single stitch. What you now need to go away and do is go away and knit that decrease row, decreasing 1 stitch every row until you have 7 stitches left. So once you've decreased right down and on your needles after you've finished a row you have 7 stitches, that's the point that we're going to need to change things slightly, and we work the final 4 rows in a slightly different way to make sure that we get an equally nice corner at the finishing corner in the same way that we got in the beginning corner. So once you have 7 stitches left and you've decreased all the way down, that's the point that you need to come back to this video and I'll show you how we finish everything off. Once you've got 7 stitches left on your needles, it's time to just tweak the way that we work our decrease rows slightly to get a nice matching corner to match the one that we started with. So in the same way that we worked setup rows at the beginning of the project, we are going to work some slightly different rows to finish off our project. Row 1, you are going to knit the first 3 stitches. Then you are going to knit the next 2 stitches together. One of those will be a yarn over, but just treat that as a normal stitch. And then you are going to knit the next 2 stitches, and you'll have gone from 7 stitches down to 6. Row 2, you are going to knit the first 2 stitches. knit the next 2 stitches together, and as you come down these rows, these stitches can be a little bit tight, but once you've got your needle in, you should be able to get that nicely. And then knit the next 2 stitches, and you should have gone from 6 stitches down to 5 stitches. For the final row before we cast off, you are going to knit the first 2 stitches. Again, knit 2 stitches together, and then knit that final stitch. You can see that we're now down just to 4 stitches, so we're back to the point that we were when we first cast on. So the final row that we're going to work is our cast off. This is a basic knitted cast off, and as we only have 4 stitches, it's really nice and short. So you want to knit the first 2 stitches. Then you want to grab the first of those 2 stitches that you knitted with your left hand needle and lift it up and over the second stitch. So you've gone from 2 stitches on this right hand needle down to 1 stitch, and you're going to knit another stitch and then repeat that process again. So you're going to lift the first stitch that was on the needle and lift it up and over the second stitch on the needle and then off the needle completely. So you've gone from 2 down to 1. Then you're going to knit the final stitch and repeat that process again. And now we just have 1 stitch left on our needle, and at this point you can break your yarn. To finish everything off nice and securely, I like to pull this stitch, the last one, so that it's nice and big, and then I can take my needle out and we can put the knitting needle to one side because we don't need that anymore. And then I grab my yarn tail and pull it through that large loop, and then I pull the tail to tighten things nice and tightly down, and then you are going to be able to sew in that end and you get a nice neat corner. And whilst with a project like this you are never going to get 4 completely matching corners, this I feel is a much neater way than taking your decrease right down to 4 stitches and then just casting off. A few final bits and bobs before I leave you. Firstly, the question that I always get asked is the blanket reversible? And in this case, yes, this blanket looks exactly the same on the front as it does on the back. That's the beauty of garter stitch. There is no right and wrong side to this project. Another question I often get asked with projects that are worked on the diagonal like this is, can you work a deeper border? So could you knit 3, 4, 5 stitches before you work your increase? And the answer to that is a little tricky. Yes, technically you can, but what you end up with on the corners where you start your decreases, if I can find one for you here, because your decreases form the corner, the more bulk you have, the more your corner is going to curl. So I've found that 3 stitches is the magic number when it comes to making sure that your border doesn't curl upwards. So yes, you could have a wider border, but you would probably need to either work some short rows or give it a really aggressive block to bring it into shape, because you are going to end up with a corner that wants to pull inwards just by the nature of the project. I've left a written pattern on my blog for those of you that like to have some written instructions to follow along to, so I'll pop the link to that in the description. So please feel free to take a look at that if you want to go away and have something written down while you're knitting this project. And if you do choose to make one of these blankets, please tag me on social media because I absolutely love to see what you are all up to. That's all from me for today. I'm going to leave you with another blanket linked here that you might like to try, and I'll be back for another video soon.